When my cat became my professor. Part 1. Transformation. The day before I was supposed to get my cat neutered, he turned into a man. Not just any man, Professor Asher Crane, the most intimidating instructor in the architecture department, the man I'd been secretly crushing on for 2 years, and the last person on Earth I'd want to see me in my ratty pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. I'd been quarantined in my studio apartment for a week, binging trashy reality TV and playing dating sims I'd die before admitting to. The pandemic had turned my winter break into a monotonous loop of delivery food and video calls with friends who were just as bored as I was. Then, Shadow, my sleek black cat, jumped off my bed one morning, and by the time his paws should have hit the floor, they were feet. Human feet. Attached to very human, very naked legs, connected to the mortified face of my professor. Clothes, he said, his voice that same ice-chip tone he used when someone showed up late to his 8 a.m. lecture. Now. My brain short-circuited. I grabbed the first shirt I could find my brother's anime girl hoodie and threw it at him, then spun around so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. I can explain actually, no, I can't explain. What the hell is happening? If I knew, he said, the sound of fabric rustling behind me, making my face burn, I wouldn't be standing in your apartment. When I finally turned around, Asher Crane's 6 feet of academic intimidation was wearing my brother's merchandise like it was haute couture. His dark hair stuck up in places, unstyled for probably the first time in his life. Without his usual tailored button-downs and that specific brand of professorial armor, he looked younger, almost human. "I've been your cat for a week," he said flatly. "I've watched you eat cereal for dinner 4 times. You talk to yourself. A lot. And those games you play, his expression could have curdled milk. We're going to pretend I didn't see those. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole." The rules revealed themselves quickly and cruelly. Asher could only maintain human form within 10 steps of me. Any farther. And he transformed back into Shadow mid-stride, which we discovered when he tried to leave my apartment, with what I can only describe as dignified fury. Watching a grown man turn into a cat while cursing would have been hilarious if it wasn't so terrifying. "This is your fault somehow," he said once I'd retrieved him from the hallway. He sat on my couch with his arms crossed, radiating professorial displeasure in my brother's hoodie. "My fault? How is this possibly my fault? This pay and springs to deceiver meters. This is in awe very the seethers. You're the constant in this equation. I'm bound to you." He said it like an accusation. Well, I didn't exactly ask for this. We glared at each other. This was not how I'd imagined spending time with my academic crush. In those daydreams, I was eloquent and impressive, not wearing 3-day-old pajamas while my cat-turned-professor judged my life choices. "I need to figure this out," he muttered, already commandeering my laptop. "There has to be a rational explanation. For turning into a cat, there's always an explanation." But his hands hesitated over the keyboard, and for just a moment I saw something other than his usual composure, a crack in that perfect, controlled facade. By nightfall, after hours of fruitless searching and increasingly bizarre Google queries, Asher's rigid posture had finally slumped. We sat in the blue glow of my laptop, the absurdity of the situation settling over us like dust. "Your assignments," he said suddenly, "the ones I gave you for break. Are you seriously? You haven't started them." Not a question. His dark eyes fixed on me with that specific brand of disappointed professor energy. "I watched you ignore them for a week. It's winter break. It's procrastination." He stood, stretching out his back with a wince. "I may not understand why this happened, but I know what I'm going to do about it. For however long this lasts, consider yourself under academic supervision. You're going to tutor me? While you're literally my cat?" Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his face. I've endured worse. That night, I slept on my couch while Asher took my bed because even transformed into a cat person and stuck in my apartment, he somehow maintained authority. As I drifted off, I heard him on the phone in the next room, his voice low and uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. "Mom? Yeah, I know it's late. I wanted to hear your voice." In the darkness, Professor Asher Crane sounded lost. And despite everything, I felt my heart crack open just a little. Part 2. Cohabitation. Living with your professor is surreal. Living with your professor who occasionally turns into your cat is a special kind of torture. Asher woke at 6:30 a.m. every morning, including weekends, including winter break. He'd pad out to my kitchen like he owned it, locate my coffee grounds with disturbing efficiency, and have a pot brewing before I'd even processed consciousness. "You could sleep in," I mumbled on the third morning, face planted on my couch. "Could you?" He set a mug on the coffee table. "You have 70 pages of reading due when break ends." "It's 6:30 inches the morning." "It's called discipline, Miss Sutton." Miss Sutton. He only used my last name when he was in full professor mode, which was apparently all the time, even in joggers and a worn t-shirt that I'd panic ordered from Target. But then Marcus, my brother, knocked on my door. I'd never seen Asher move so fast. He was across the room in 2 strides, already shrinking, and I just managed to grab Shadow the cat before Marcus's key turned in the lock. Surprise! Marcus bounded in with takeout bags, his perpetual optimism undimmed by quarantine. "Figured you'd be going stir-crazy." I brought Ty. "You're a lifesaver." I clutched Shadow Asher against my chest, feeling his little cat heart hammering. Or maybe that was my heart. Hard to tell. Marcus's eyes went to the cat. "Shadow's gotten skinny. You feeding him enough?" "He's fine. Just active." When Marcus reached to pet him, Shadow hissed and swiped, leaving a neat line of scratches across his hand. Jesus. Since when is he aggressive? Since always? I tried for casual and probably landed somewhere around definitely hiding something. Come on, food's getting cold. After Marcus left, I let Asher down. He immediately stalked away, then turned back into a person the moment he hit the 10-step threshold, looking deeply annoyed. Your brother is insufferable. He brought food. He brought judgment. Asher ran a hand through his hair, looking more ruffled than I'd ever seen him. Does he always touch people's pets without asking? You're not actually a pet. I'm aware. Something sharp flashed in his eyes. I'm very aware of what I am, Miss Sutton. The apartment felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. Asher turned toward the window, his shoulders tight. This isn't sustainable, he said quietly. When break ends, when I have to teach what then, I'll turn into a cat in front of 50 students? I hadn't thought that far ahead, but he had, because of course he had. Asher Crane thought everything through, planned 6 steps ahead, never let himself be vulnerable. Except now he was trapped. We'll figure it out, I heard myself say. There has to be a way to fix this. He laughed, and it wasn't a kind sound. Always the optimist. Better than assuming we're doomed. I prefer realistic. But when he turned back, some of the hardness had left his face. Though I suppose your way is less exhausting. The days blurred together. Asher implemented a schedule. 2 hours of reading after breakfast, model work after lunch, research paper drafting before dinner. He supervised everything with the intensity of a drill sergeant, leaning over my shoulder to point out errors in my CAD drawings, explaining load-bearing calculations, like he was conducting a personal lecture series for an audience of 1. This roof pitch is completely wrong. The snow load would collapse the entire structure. It's Phoenix, there's no snow. There could be. Designed for worst-case scenarios, not best-case fantasies. I fixed the roof pitch. But strange things happened too. Asher, it turned out, was a terrible cook but an excellent dishwasher. He organized my spice cabinet alphabetically and color-coded my class notes without asking. He drank his coffee black, but put cream in mine before I had to ask. He noticed things. One night, I looked up from my laptop to find him watching me, his expression unreadable. What? You bite your lip when you concentrate, he said. You've been doing it all week. It's distracting. Distracting how? He didn't answer, just returned to his own work, but I caught the faintest color on his cheeks. My friend's video called that weekend for their traditional New Year's check-in. Asher sat on the far side of the couch, ostensibly reading, but clearly listening. Wait, you've actually finished Crane's assignments? Mara's voice exploded through my speaker. Linnea, are you feeling okay? I just had time. You never have time. You famously do everything last minute. Jen leaned into frame, squinting. Is this about impressing him? Did Professor Hot but Terrifying actually notice you exist? It's not. I'm not. She totally wants to impress him, Mara announced to the group. Our Linnea is in love with Professor Crane. I am not. Asher coughed. When I glanced over, his attention was very deliberately fixed on his book, but his mouth curved ever so slightly. I wanted to die. After I hung up, Asher set down his book. So, Professor Hot but Terrifying? They don't know what they're talking about. He stood, stretching. For what it's worth, your work has improved. Significantly. He paused in the doorway to my bedroom. You're more capable than you give yourself credit for, Linnea. First name. He'd used my first name. I lay awake on the couch long after his light went out, replaying that moment the way my name had sounded in his voice. By the time break ended, I'd completed every assignment he'd given me and done them well. Asher's standards were exacting, but for the first time, I met them. More than met them. The night before classes resumed, he paced my apartment with barely controlled tension. This won't work. I can't teach from the front row, so I'll sit in the front row. People will notice. People never notice me. It came out more bitter than I intended. Asher stopped pacing. That's not true. I'm a solid B student who sits in the back. I'm invisible. You're not invisible to me. He said it simply, like a fact. You never have been. The words hung between us, too heavy to examine. We'll make it work, I said finally. We have to. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I suppose you're moving to the front row. Part 3, the temple. Classes resumed with an absurdity I could never have predicted. I sat in the front row of Asher's lectures while he taught from the podium, never venturing more than 10 steps into the classroom. Students whispered about his new teaching style. Some thought he was being more accessible. Others suspected he was having an affair with a front row student. Neither theory was quite right, but one was uncomfortably close. Miss Sutton, Asher called during a Thursday lecture, 3 weeks into the semester. Perhaps you can explain the principle of tensile strength. Every head swiveled toward me. I could feel Jen's confusion boring into my back. I never knew answers. Never. But Asher had drilled these concepts into me over break, night after night at my kitchen table. Tensile strength is the maximum stress a material can withstand while being stretched before breaking, I said, my voice steady. It's measured in units of force per cross-sectional area. Something flashed in Asher's eyes. Pride, maybe. Correct. And why does this matter in structural design? We continued like that, a rhythm we'd developed without meaning to, professor and student dancing around the truth that we'd been living together, that he knew how I took my coffee, that I'd seen him vulnerable and afraid in the middle of the night. After class, I followed him to his office as had become our routine. You're showing off, I said once the door closed. I'm assessing your knowledge. But he was almost smiling. You've been paying attention. Hard not to when my teacher's also my roommate. The word hung between us. Roommate. It was accurate but insufficient for what we'd become. Asher moved to the window, looking out over campus. I spoke to Professor Wilson from the planning department. He studies feng shui, supernatural elements in architecture. Okay? He thinks he knows what this is. Asher's reflection in the glass looked troubled. He says it's called soul collision. When two souls that were entangled in a past life meet again, sometimes there's interference. Past lives? I tried to keep my voice neutral. That's a little out there. I'm a cat who turns into a man at will. Out there is now my normal. He turned to face me. Wilson says the only way to break this is to resolve whatever happened before. And he thinks there's a place that might help an old temple about an hour from here. A temple? An abandoned Tang Dynasty-era temple. It's part of a restoration project the university is partnering on. His jaw tightened. I don't believe in this supernatural nonsense, but I'm running out of rational options. When do we go? He looked surprised that I'd agreed so quickly. Tonight, after office hours. Then it's a date. The word slipped out before I could stop it. Asher's expression shifted into something I couldn't read. Miss Sutton. It's a figure of speech. Is it? He held my gaze for a beat too long, then looked away. Wear practical shoes. And here. He pulled out a red cord bracelet from his desk drawer. Wilson gave me these. For protection. His fingers brushed mine as he tied it around my wrist, and I felt that touch like electricity. The temple materialized from the fog like something from another world. Ancient stone, curved eaves, empty windows like watching eyes. The sun had already set, painting everything in shades of gray and deeper gray. This is creepy, I said. It's historical, but Asher's hand found my elbow, steadying. The architecture is Tang Dynasty, 8th century, remarkably preserved. Still creepy. Noted. His thumb traced an absent circle on my arm before he seemed to realize and pulled away. Stay close. We entered through a gap in the wall where a door had once stood. Inside, the temple was vast and hollow, Buddha statues looming from the shadows. Some were intact, serene stone faces watching our intrusion. Others had been vandalized or removed, leaving empty pedestals like missing teeth. Our footsteps echoed too loudly. "What exactly are we looking for?" I whispered. Wilson said there would be a marker, something to indicate. He stopped suddenly. There. In the back hall, worn characters marked a floor tile, barely visible under decades of dust. Asher knelt, brushing away debris with careful fingers. Up close, I could see the concentration on his face, the way his brow furrowed. "Linnea," he said quietly, using my first name again. "I need to tell you something, before whatever happens next." "Okay?" That first night, when I woke up in your apartment, I was terrified. Not because of the transformation, but because... He looked up at me, and in the dim temple light, his eyes were impossibly dark. "I'd been watching you all semester. In class, in the halls. I told myself it was because you weren't living up to your potential, but that wasn't entirely true." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Asher, let me finish." His hand found mine. "If something happens in here, if this goes wrong, I need you to know that these past weeks haven't been a burden. They've been..." The floor dropped out beneath us. I tumbled down stone steps in complete darkness, my body slamming against edges and corners, Asher's shout echoing above me. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in a temple anymore. I was in a body that wasn't mine, wearing rough cloth, sitting in a small house that smelled of earth and smoke. My hands moved without my permission, trembling in my lap. The door opened. A man entered, and even though he wore ancient military garb, even though his hair was different, I knew that face. Asher, but not my Asher. This one was younger, rougher, and when he smiled at me, actually smiled. Wide and genuine, I felt a jolt of recognition from the body I inhabited. "Did you eat today?" His voice was gentle, so different from the professor I knew. I tried to speak, but the body wouldn't obey. I just sat there, tears sliding down cheeks that weren't mine, and felt an overwhelming wave of emotion that didn't belong to me. Love. This body loved him desperately. The general, because that's what he was, I understood somehow knelt before me and wiped my tears. And that's when I saw it. Through this body's eyes, I was looking up at him. My eyes were where a chin should be. My face was upside down. The general didn't flinch. He just cupped my inverted face and pressed a kiss to my forehead, which was really near my jaw. "I don't care what you look like," he said. "I never have." I was trapped in that body for what felt like days, watching their life unfold. The general was kind, devoted, patient with this wife, whose face marked her as cursed. He was heading to war soon, he explained, but he'd heard of herbs that might cure her condition. "I'll bring them back," he promised. "I'll fix this." And I felt this body's response, the surge of desperate, terrified love. The determination. That night, while the general slept, the body I inhabited stood and walked outside. I tried to stop her, tried to scream, to take control, but I was just a passenger, helpless as she raised her hands to her face, and dug her eyes out. The pain was distantly abstract, like watching it happen to someone else. The body stumbled through darkness, guided by memory and desperation, until she found the general's sleeping form and pressed her eyes into his hands. "For victory," she whispered. "So you'll always win. So you'll come home to me." The general's anguish was a living thing. He held her as she bled, screaming for help that wouldn't come, and kept saying, "You fool, you fool, you beautiful fool." I wanted to tell him. She did it because she loved him, because that's what love was in that life sacrifice without question, devotion without limit. But I couldn't speak. I could only watch as the general left for war, as days turned to weeks, as the blinded wife waited at the threshold. She waited for years. And he never came home. I was pulled from that body abruptly, thrust into another memory, another place. A military camp, soldiers everywhere, and there, in a commander's tent removing a mask. Asher's face. The general. "Sir," an advisor said, bowing, "about the herbs you requested. We found them, but..." "But what?" "The cliff is very steep, dangerous." The general stood. "I'll get them myself. I don't trust anyone else with this." I followed like a ghost as he traveled to a cliff face, had himself lowered on ropes toward a small ledge where white flowers grew. The azure ringgrass, the cure for his wife. He reached the ledge safely, gathered the herbs with shaking hands, then looked up, and saw the advisor cutting his rope. The general had just enough time to look shocked before the rope snapped and he fell, not to his death, but to a ledge just below, trapped. He shouted until his voice broke. No one came. Days passed. I couldn't look away as the general weakened, as he stared at the white flowers clutched in his hand. "Beggar ticks," he murmured finally, his voice barely there. "She wanted me to embroider these on my collar. She loved these flowers." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry. I couldn't keep my promise." And then the general died, alone on a cliff face, while an imposter took his place and his wife waited for a man who would never return. I knew what came next. The imposter parading as the general, returning to the wife who couldn't see his face. The slow realization that something was wrong. The years of gaslighting, of cruelty, of mockery. The wife's grief turning to rage. The transformation into a monster, bloated and terrible, eating those who'd wronged her. And finally, the false general wearing the eyes of the woman he'd betrayed, hunting her down and killing her. My name? I heard the monster whisper with her dying breath, the only name that mattered. Asher. I gasped awake, back in my own body. In the temple, Shadow, my actual cat, was patting my face with his paw. I grabbed him, confused, then looked around. Asher was sitting against a wall, watching me. He looked exhausted, haunted, years older than he'd been an hour ago. "You saw it," he said, not a question. "All of it." My voice broke. He loved her, and she never knew she thought he abandoned her. "I know." Asher's hand clenched into a fist. I was in his body. I felt everything he felt. The rope being cut, dying on that cliff, knowing she'd wait forever for a dead man. We stared at each other across the temple floor. Two people carrying memories that weren't ours, grief that had aged 1,000 years. "That advisor," I said. "He took your eyes, used them to take his place." And when the wife became a monster, it was easy to paint her as evil. The legend got it all wrong. Asher's voice was hollow. He died trying to save her. She died waiting for him. And everyone just remembered the monster. Shadow jumped from my arms and ran toward a shaft of moonlight. When I followed, I found myself outside the temple. The moon was full, the night clear. Asher emerged behind me, steadier now. "It's over," he said. "I can feel it. Whatever was binding us to that history, it's done." "Because we know the truth now? Maybe." He looked at the temple, then at me. Or maybe because we survived it together, unlike them. We walked back to his car in silence. Shadow trotted ahead, just a normal cat again. When we reached the parking lot, Asher held his hand out, fingers spread. I took 10 steps away from him. 11, 12. He stayed human. "It worked," I breathed. Asher smiled, real and unguarded. It worked. But in the car, driving back toward campus with the temple disappearing behind us, something felt unfinished. We'd broken the curse, ended the collision of souls. And now we had to figure out what we were without it. Part 4. After. The rest of the semester passed in a strange limbo. I sat in the front row of Asher's classes out of habit, and he no longer had a reason to avoid the back of the room, but somehow always migrated to my side of the classroom anyway. We didn't talk about the temple. We didn't talk about what he'd started to say before we fell. But I felt him watching me during lectures, and I found myself lingering after class, even when I didn't have questions. "Your capstone project?" he said one afternoon in his office, 2 weeks before graduation. "It's excellent work, the best in your cohort." "Really? Would I lie?" "You might, if you wanted to be nice." I'm never nice, but his eyes were soft. "I'm honest. And honestly, Linnea, you've exceeded every expectation." The way he said my name made my chest tight. I had a good teacher. "You had determination." He stood, moving to the window. "I'm leaving the university, after this semester." My heart dropped. "What?" "A friend and I are opening a private architectural firm here in the city," he added quickly, turning back. "Not far, but I won't be teaching anymore." Oh, I didn't know what else to say. The thought of campus without Asher felt wrong, incomplete. "There's a position available," he continued, not meeting my eyes. "If you're interested. After you graduate, after you finish your master's degree. We maintain appropriate boundaries until then. But, are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity." Finally, He looked at me. But only if it's what you want. Not because of what happened. Not because of what we saw in that temple. Because you're talented and dedicated and you deserve. Yes, I interrupted. Yes, I want it. I stopped. The rest of the sentence too dangerous to finish. Asher took a step toward me, then stopped himself. 2 more years, he said quietly. That's how long your program is, yes? You're going to wait 2 years? I'm going to wait as long as it takes. The intensity in his voice pinned me in place. That general waited for his wife, even dying. The least I can do is wait properly. Asher, Professor Crane. He corrected, but gently. For 2 more years, I'm Professor Crane. It has to be that way. I understood. He was protecting both of us, maintaining the lines that needed to be maintained. But God, it hurt. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. Did you mean what you said? Before we fell. About watching me. His silence stretched too long. Then, yes. I noticed you the first day you walked into my classroom. I noticed the way you doodled in the margins of your notes. The way you tucked your hair behind your ear when you were thinking. I noticed everything, and I told myself I was being professional, observant, when really, he stopped, seeming to gather courage. Really, I was just looking for excuses to notice you more. That's not very professional, Professor. No. A ghost of a smile. It isn't. Graduation came too fast and too slow. I walked across the stage to polite applause, accepted my diploma, and found Asher in the crowd afterward. He was standing apart from the other faculty, watching. Congratulations, Miss Sutton. Thank you, Professor Crane. We maintained perfect formality, perfect distance. Anyone watching would have seen nothing but a professor congratulating a former student. But when he extended his hand to shake mine, and I took it, his thumb traced once across my knuckles a reminder, a promise. 2 years. I threw myself into my master's program with the intensity Asher had taught me. The work was brutal, the hours long, but I loved it. I was good at it. Every model I built, every paper I wrote, I imagined showing him. Imagined his quiet pride. We didn't talk often. A few emails about recommendation letters, about my program progress. Always professional, always careful. But once, late one night 6 months into my master's degree, I texted him, finished my thesis proposal. Thought you'd want to know. His response came immediately. Proud of you. Just 3 words. But I read them 100 times. The 2 years passed in a blur of all-nighters and coffee, and slowly learning who I was as an architect, as a person, as someone separate from the student Asher had tutored in her tiny apartment. I dated briefly. It never went anywhere. My friends said I was too picky. Really, I was just waiting. Finally, graduation loomed again, my master's degree this time. The night before the ceremony, my phone rang. Linnea, Asher's voice, after months of only texts and professional emails. Are you busy? Not really. Just panicking about tomorrow. Don't. You're going to be brilliant. A pause. There's a garden behind the event hall. After the ceremony, I'll be there. Asher. I can't wait anymore, he said quietly. I've been patient. I've been appropriate. But tomorrow, you're not my student anymore. And I need to tell you. I need to say. I'll be there. I interrupted. I'll find you. The ceremony felt endless. I barely heard my name called, barely registered walking across the stage again. All I could think about was Asher, waiting in that garden. When I finally escaped, the night air was cool and sweet with flowering roses. I found him standing by a fountain, wearing the same black slacks and